Thank you very much, Greg. That was really nice. And this is actually, of all the years I've been doing this talk about law and drones, I can't remember ever being part of an entrepreneurial audience. So it's really cool to step out of the lawyer role for a minute or for 20 minutes and talk a little bit about pretending to be an entrepreneur. So let's see if this works. There we go. Let me tell you about my entrepreneurial story to the extent there is one. I actually have been doing this kind of thing for over 20 years. I started off as a model aircraft enthusiast. That's what we used to call drones before the word drone became popular. This is actually a picture of my very first model aircraft up in the top left. It was nitro fuel powered. Those of you who've done this for at least 5 years probably know what that is. Just about everything I was battery powered. And it was analog radios. Things were unreliable. There was no such thing as GPS hold. It was really kind of primitive, but it was certainly a lot of fun. And as Greg mentioned, I had the privilege of taking on some of the very first cases that attempted to answer some of the questions about what laws apply, what regulatory framework should apply to the operation of drones, not for hobby purposes necessarily, but for commercial purposes. And then subsequent to the first case, the Perker case involving commercial use, I took on a case for Texas EquiSearch involving humanitarian volunteer search and rescue and the use of drones to help find missing people. Actually remains probably my favorite case. Taking on those cases and talking about drone law when people wanted to hear about it certainly elevated my profile as it did with Greg's. Ended up on the news, ended up in Smithsonian Air and Space. It's been a lot of fun, but what's really great about it is that I get to talk about all the wonderful new innovation and entrepreneurial efforts that I see around the world in this space. And just to list a few, the next slide, please. You're probably going to hear a lot about these kinds of things. So just as a matter of example, we've got drones already being used for cinematography and obviously still photographs as well, agriculture, infrastructure inspection, insurance assessments. So I live near New York, and we had a hurricane a few years back. You probably remember that. We are still recovering, and to the extent you can get the drone out there to take pictures of the roof and prevent someone from going up and risking their own life or injury in having to step on the roof just to take a picture, you could use a drone to substitute for that. Environmental wildlife, there's anti-poaching efforts going on around the world, particularly in Africa. Delivery drones, we've already heard from Ben about that. And most important to me is whatever you guys are working on. We're going to hear from a number of people tonight, and every week, even in my old role as a lawyer and certainly in my role as VP of Policy and Legal Affairs at DJI, I hear about great things that people are working on. And it's just a really exciting place to be if you're an entrepreneur or if you're interested in legal issues as I am. Let's get the next slide, please. Next slide. You can just advance it. There's always a technical problem at the drone conference. You're at the cutting edge of technology, and this happened like 2 weeks ago in Las Vegas with Greg, right? We couldn't get the slides working. Maybe it's you. Clicking it. Okay. Well, let me talk a little bit about DJI. I think it's the next thing I was planning to talk about. So DJI is, as Greg mentioned, we're the leading manufacturer of consumer and commercial drones in the world. I think if you look at where we stand with respect to other companies in the market, depending on what you consider the market to be, whether you include the toys, whether you include defense systems, which I don't personally, we're at about 70% market share. And if you look at what the FAA calls Section 333 exemptions, those are effectively permits for commercial use, we have about 75% market share there. About 75% of the companies and individuals who are intending to use drones for commercial purposes have named at least one DJI drone in their application as the drone they intend to use for that commercial purpose. So we're in a great position to help all of you and to help the industry grow the technology and bring a lot of benefits, and I think that was the reason for the platform. What is the billion or whatever dollar company that we are, what can we do in this space to assist entrepreneurs? Next slide, please. So the first thing, I'm going to talk about three things. And the three things we can do and we are doing is to create a platform for innovation and entrepreneurship. We have a mechanism for funding. And the third thing, which is the closest one to my heart, is advocacy. We are advocating on behalf of all of you in this space. So we have essentially a platform for development on the drone systems. This kind of gives you, I actually borrowed this from one of our partners, a sense of the different verticals in the drone space, the platform, the operating system, hardware, components. We have people who are making components for our drones. So there's one company that has virtual reality, like 3D glasses. There's another that has sort of like a ring control. You can move the drone with your hand. So we've got hardware development and we've got software development. Next. And we have an SDK. I think you'll hear that word a lot tonight. I assume you know what it means. We have partners who are developing software to use on our drones, both at the app level and also at the hardware level. We also have a relatively new product called the Mitrice 100. This is specifically designed for people developing both hardware and software. It has expansion bays. It can accommodate 2 batteries, so you get 40 minutes of flight time. There's what we call the guidance system, which is the first, I think, the first commercially available sense and avoid technology. It will, if you steer it into the wall, it will stop itself. You actually can't make it fly into a wall. And this is being used by developers to build out hardware and software solutions. Next. And with the SDK, we have a number of partners developing software. I've put a few of their logos up on the screen. There are many others. You're certainly welcome to contact me or someone else in our SDK team to find out how you, too, can be a partner in development. This is a screenshot of Drone Deploy. They work on 3D mapping of different farmland and structures and things like that. Next. Second way we are encouraging and assisting innovation is through funding. Obviously very important for any entrepreneur to at some point acquire funding for the venture. We've partnered with Excel venture capital firm to create Sky Fund, and this is really a joint venture where they are providing capital, we're providing expertise and support to help different companies, entrepreneurs in the system to help develop the technology in the ecosystem. So using DJI as the platform that covers 70% of the market, you have access to a specific fund that is dedicated to helping you get your innovations off the ground, sorry about the pun, and up into operations. Next. So these are 250,000 early stage entrepreneurs. I've taken this right from the Sky Fund slides, so this is not my field, but I wanted to make sure I covered it because of the topic of this particular conference. Some of the points that might be of interest here in terms of rights and opportunities and how the funding works. Again, if you're interested in that, see me separately. If we could get the next slide. What I want to talk most about, though, and this is the thing that I work on every single day, and Greg knows this because we're texting each other all the time about these kinds of things, is advocacy. We have a new technology that is really being closely scrutinized for legal and regulatory frameworks. How do these devices fit into aviation laws? How do they fit into existing privacy laws? Do we need new legislation? Do we need to do something about aircraft certification, pilot certification? What should people know before they fly a drone? Where should they be allowed to fly it? Things like that. There are countless questions. I wanted to focus on just a few, and the one that's most important to me, and I think important to entrepreneurs, is this idea of a micro category. Now, if you've read about drones and how they are currently regulated, you probably already know that there's this dichotomy between recreational use and commercial use. And the recreational users essentially are not formally regulated. There are some guidelines that date back to 1981. We don't need to get into those specifically. If you operate commercially, the FAA would tell you you need an exemption to do it. Obviously, a lot of people are operating without such an exemption. Setting aside arguments for and against, the point is the world right now is divided into these two categories. But as I'll explain, I don't think the world works that way. I don't think this kind of technology, unlike manned aviation, doesn't really fall into those neat categories and can't really be regulated exactly that way. So one of the things that I proposed and continue to advocate for is that we have a micro category, basically a very low weight category where it doesn't matter what you're doing, whether you're doing research and development, whether you're doing an academic program, you're teaching people how to use drones for journalism, as some people are, you're out there developing a piece of hardware or software and you want to do testing, or maybe you're just out there learning about the technology and having fun, regardless of the specific intent and purpose of your operation, that there's a category where people are free to openly explore and use the technology to develop it. And that's what I call micro. Other countries call it the very small category. The emerging international standard, if there is one, is 4.4 pounds or 2 kilograms. So if you have a drone that is that small, basically the weight of one of our Phantom drones or many of the other entry-level consumer categories, you would be free under this framework to operate it without all of the regulatory burdens that I think are coming our way regardless. Pilot licensing, aircraft registration, certification, all the things that you need to worry about if you were operating a much heavier, more dangerous system. And it's a set of simple rules. So you fly at least 5 miles from the airports. That's where something like AirMap could tell you where you are and whether you can operate. And within visual line of sight. So think about building inspections, inspecting, taking photographs of farmland after a storm. Really simple, close-in operations where you can do a lot of great R&D and business development. Next, please. We are not the first country to consider this. CASA, which is the civil aviation regulator in Australia, has already proposed a 2-kilogram category, and they determined that there's very little risk, and that, as it was covered in the press, this is a real benefit to businesses. And there are really a handful of countries that already have this or have it proposed. Next. And here's where I think it's really crucial for this group in particular. This solves problems. The problem of categorization. What is your operation? Is it business? Is it commercial if you're just kind of tinkering with something and you want to develop a new application? Most people in this field, myself included, started off as enthusiasts, hobbyists. We're just playing around with it, and the light bulb goes off, and you say, wait a second, I've thought of something that's really beneficial to my own business or to my neighbor's business, and I want to go out and try it. And the moment you do that, do you want to have to jump through all these aviation-style regulatory hurdles in order to go out there and just try to develop something? My feeling is no. You should not have to do that, particularly if you're doing something that's inherently safe, which I think an operation at this level is. So you've got this sort of this notion that the category doesn't matter, the intent doesn't matter. Here's a slide of a situation. This was flooding in Maine. These 2 boys were stuck on the rocks in a river. Only one of them had a life vest. So the person who was there with one of our Phantom drones, small 3-pound drone, thought to tie a line to it, fly it out there, and set up the line so they could deliver a life vest to the boy who was on the rock. And he was rescued. Very simple, safe operation below the treetops. I don't think a replacement for an airplane. I think a replacement for maybe a stick or a ladder or a camera crane or something on the order of a hammer or a tool that you can use in different contexts without regard to the actual purpose. This was essentially a public rescue, a volunteer type of operation. So it opens up the doorway to all sorts of things, including volunteer firefighting, search and rescue, unpaid news gathering. You go out and you take a picture, it's newsworthy, you put it on YouTube, you monetize it. Is that commercial from the outset? I don't know. We could talk, I'm not at the law school, but I'm near the law school, and I think we could talk all day about what it means to be a commercial operator. And most importantly, entrepreneurs. Where do you fall when you're at the early stage of developing a technology? Where do you fall in the spectrum? Next, please. Finally, the advocacy efforts have not just been the federal aviation regulatory scheme, which is what the micro rule would address, but also what's going on at the state level. And this, I think, is a real challenge for all of us, myself included, is that we have a lot of states that have moved forward with anti-drone legislation, primarily on the concern that drones could invade privacy, could be misused by the police department, could take invasive pictures. In the case of the police, it's without a warrant. In the case of your neighbor, it could be spying on you. We've seen a lot of headlines about that, and those headlines get translated into proposed legislation at the state level. This is an out-of-date map. It's even more serious than this, the number of states that either have proposed or have implemented anti-drone legislation. Next slide, please. And just to give you a specific anecdote that's really, I think, close to everyone here because I'm in California, I spent a significant amount of time responding to Senate Bill 142. This was proposed back at the beginning of the year, originally as a privacy law. It was intended to basically take the existing paparazzi laws that prevent people from taking a picture of doing something private in an offensive way and going out and publishing it, and applied that to drones. I think that concept is more or less okay. What happened at the end of June, after months and months of going through committees and passing through the Senate, is that that bill was changed. So the law students here would be, I think, very interested to think about it this way. We started off with a privacy tort, effectively, that was changed with a very subtle amendment. This is actually what happened. They took out this reference to Section 1708 and replaced it with 3334. We went from invasion of privacy tort to a property law, unlawful occupation of real estate. So it's as if you were walking onto the land of somebody else. And that makes you liable, I think strictly liable, regardless of damages, including for the benefit of walking onto and occupying that land. So you're talking about a very different doctrine, legal doctrine, the result of which is you'd effectively ban drones from flying over private property without permission under 350 feet. And that, I think, is very stifling to innovation. You'd be worried about lawsuits even in the absence of damages. The measure of damages would be the benefit of your flight, not whether or not you actually damaged someone, and not whether you took a picture. So there was no distinction for photographs or even having a camera on the drone. So a bunch of us in the industry responded. I think there's another slide on this. Oh yes, so here's the benefits, the damages as measured under that existing invasion of privacy, unlawful occupation statute are the benefit of the obtained by the person wrongfully occupying the land. So it's like you're selling lemonade on someone's front lawn, and they come home and they learn about it, and you didn't do any harm, but you received a benefit, now you have to disgorge it. So you've got a situation that would, I think, trigger a lot of frivolous litigation. You'd end up in all sorts of philosophical discussions about is someone damaged or not, what's the benefit of a single drone flight in the R&D context, what if you captured a Pulitzer-winning photograph, what if you're a real estate agent and you take a picture of the property you sell for a commission, is it the whole commission that's the benefit? I don't think we want to go down that, and it doesn't protect privacy. So thankfully, the industry responded jointly, and we were able to obtain a veto from Governor Brown of this legislation, which otherwise sailed right through all the committees and both sides of the assembly. So the lesson here is that we've got a lot of pending legislation at the state level and even at the local level. And so to the extent that you're interested in being an entrepreneur and developing the value of the technology, it's really important to stay vigilant and to pay attention to what's going on, including right here in Los Angeles County. I know that the Los Angeles City Council recently passed a resolution that, I don't have the text in front of me, but is essentially an anti-drone resolution, and I've seen a number of cities propose anti-drone ordinances. And I think although I and other people are concerned about actual privacy invasions and are certainly amenable to reasonable responses to actual threats, a lot of this stuff goes way too far. And I think it's really important that we pay attention to that. And if you see something that's of concern, contact me, contact other people in the industry, contact Greg, someone who can engage the lawmakers and explain what the technology is actually about. I'll just close by saying that in many of these instances when I go and I talk to lawmakers, they've never seen the drone, they've never flown it. They actually don't know what the technology is about. There are a lot of misconceptions because of the word drone. They have sort of assumptions about what the technology can do and how the law can respond to it. So really important as you're out there developing the technology to talk to people about it and show them what it can do and all the good that it can bring. Thank you.